Appreciate you taking the time to tune in. Today, I think I'm going to be talking about a very important subject to me and my children, my grandchildren, and I'm real concerned. But maybe the place for me to start is to look over my shoulder here. There's a gentleman, John Wayne, up here that says courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. And that kind of comes to mind right now because I'm not that comfortable being in front of a camera. And what kind of comes to mind is some work I did back in the 90s with my sons on education corruption in California. In fact, my boys and I did a book on it later. Um, but we were able to hold a bunch of folks accountable, and we got a lot more money, we think, back to the kids where it belongs, with the kids and teachers in the classroom. Um, and Before I really get started, I'd like to focus on a term I'm going to use quite a bit. It's called a spectral. And the definition of that is the activity of a quantity of radioactive material in which one nucleus disintegrates per second. So keep that in mind as I'm talking. And let me first start by addressing your attention here to the whiteboard. I'm going to start here with Chernobyl in 1986. There was one nuclear reactor that there was a human error. It melted down. It emitted radiation for 12 days. Um, they were able to put a sarcophagus over it and seal it up. But they really rallied. They had 600,000 men involved. Um, and a lot of folks died trying to put the cork back in that bottle. Some 25 years later, they did tests to see how the kids were doing, and they noticed that the same levels of contamination and thyroid cancer, and that it had not diminished over time. It was holding solid. Pretty serious event. And I'll go into this later in a couple other videos. And this whole Chernobyl event, those children are really in trouble. We really need to keep in mind how serious that is. I believe 80% of the children in the Belarus and Ukraine area are really paying the price for that meltdown. Let me move forward to Fukushima. That happened in March 11 of 2011. Unfortunately, we celebrated the 2000th day on September 1. It's been emitting contaminants, radiation for over 2,000 days now. To remind you, there were 4 nuclear reactors. One of them they were in the process of refueling, so it wasn't as serious. There were 3 others that went into complete meltdown, which is a very serious event. It's never happened on this planet before. One vaporized number 3 reactor. There was a steam explosion, and essentially it vaporized it. One that's a real problem is reactor number 1 is doing what's called fissioning. There's an expert that talks about this. His name is Dr. Jerry Peterman. Seems to be quite knowledgeable about it. I'll have, in a later tape, I'll talk about my sources and such, so you'll have a better idea why it's important. But let me focus on this fission event in number 1 and explain that the Meteorological Research Institute suggests that it's emitted 40,000 trillion becquerels of radiation, specifically cesium-137 and a myriad of other ones. So it's 40,000 trillion becquerels. And to put that into a little bit different perspective to understand the enormity of that number, I did a little research on $1 trillion in $1 bills put end to end would lap the planet approximately 3,898 times. So that's only $1 trillion. So you can kind of wrap your brain around this thing called 40,000 trillion becquerels and understand how large a number that is. Moving forward, I'd like to talk about the tests that were done in Fukushima. This represents one where they had 94,975 children tested. Very unfortunately, 44.2% of them were showing significant signs of thyroid disease. It's a big problem. Um, and it's important for us to keep in mind what's going on there. Um, Days after the meltdown, they saw iodine 131 levels go through the roof in California, Hawaii, Alaska, Oregon, Washington, all along the West Coast. And they were saying then that the numbers were as high as 211 times above normal. Another event about 7 weeks after the meltdown in Orange County, California, they indicate that some 270 times background was available there. Uh, Separately, the USGS confirmed that the cesium-137 was the highest ever recorded in that event. Moving down to show some of the concerns I have on the West Coast and to better explain what's going on there, you first have to understand that we are downwind and down current. The second strongest current in the world is the Japanese current coming across from Japan to the west coast of the United States. It's a real problem. Um, Let me add some clarity here with this statement by the Open Journal of Pediatrics. They're saying that 28% of the children in California are more likely to develop congenital hypothyroidism since 3 of 2011. Again, that was the Open Journal of Pediatrics. They also went on to comment that 3% decrease in the rest of the United States. So as it was going up on the West Coast, it was going down in other areas, indicating clearly that Fukushima was the issue. So keep that in mind. Also, UC Berkeley was doing soil samples back then and found that the soil samples were contaminated 10,000 times higher with radioactive isotopes across California. So California has taken a pretty good hit. Down here a little lower, Fukushima has no borders. It does impact all of us that are on this planet, and it actually cycles every 42 days around the planet. So unfortunately, the Japanese are sharing their problem with all of us on an ongoing basis. A point that I'd like to focus on for a minute is that with radiation, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, and you can't feel it. You're just not aware that it's around. And the truth is, it's here impacting you and your loved ones every day. We need to understand that back on this 28% of the children, you know, there are deleterious effects that are taking place right now that we need to be mindful of. And if I could take a look over here for a second, I'd like to point out something, and then I'll be kind of wrapping this up. So this container here represents the number of radionuclides that the scientists are saying are actually being emitted by Fukushima. And as you can see, this is a rather large container. I counted those rascals out, and there's 2,000 of them in there, and it's pretty scary. So right away, I'll be talking to you about that, and trying to point out some clarity on this presentation I have ready for you here on the next video. I appreciate you taking the time, and I hope I'm able to answer some of the questions, and hope that you're interested in following up with your own research on this important issue. Thank you for your time.